I think this is going to be part 3. I'm not sure. It's either 2 or 3. What to do about Dirk? If Dirk had a severe case of the devouring, his life would be in danger unless he was given access to a magic tool that could suck the large amount of mana out of him. I needed to do whatever I could to ensure his safety, even if just by a little bit. Lutz, could I ask you to do something? I want you to go to the forest and get some tau fruit. They'll last if we put them on the dirt part of the floor in the workshop storage area, right? I called from the workshop up to the 2nd floor of my chambers, then whispered my request so Daniel by the door wouldn't hear me. It would be better if nobles did not learn of tau fruit. I glanced Dirk's way, and Lutz gave a small nod before immediately running off to the forest. Having extrapolated the circumstances just from my small gesture, once he got back, we'd be able to stop Dirk from losing control of his mana and dying from it. Sister mine, I have gotten permission for a meeting, Fran returned, wearing an exhausted expression. Both Arno and the High Priest had looked annoyed at having 2 emergency meetings repeated requests in a row, but urgent business was urgent. Urgent business was urgent business. I needed to see the High Priest to learn whether Dirk really had the devouring, how much money he had, and what we needed to do for him, what we needed to do with him. I suppose we shouldn't give Dirk to Wilma yet, since we'll be bringing him to the High Priest's room. Fran, would you carry him? I intended to go to the High Priest's room with Dirk, since everything revolved around him, but Delia hugged him protectively, and Fran slowly shook his head. Sister mine, we cannot take a pre-baptism orphan out of the orphanage. My chambers counted as part of the orphanage, since they were in the same building, but apparently taking him to the High Priest's room was no good. I had forgotten that we weren't supposed to take them out, since we were stealthily taking the kids to the forest, but now that I thought about it, the pre-baptism kids were supposed to still be stuck inside the orphanage, so that the Blue Priest wouldn't have to see them. I thought that bringing Dirk would be important for the discussion with the High Priest, but if you insist. I brought Fran and Daniel with me to the High Priest's room, as I always did. Once inside, the High Priest gave a slight grimace of annoyance and asked, "What is it this time?" "The matter I want to discuss is very important. Is it something we should talk about out here?" I said in a quiet voice, pointing my eyes toward the hidden room. The High Priest raised an eyebrow, then held out the sound-blocking magic tool. I firmly gripped it. "This discussion is important enough for you to actually pay attention to your surroundings and think?" "Yes, it's about Dirk, the baby from yesterday. I believe he has the devouring." After I explained what Dirk had looked like this morning, the High Priest's brow furrowed hard and let out a heavy sigh. "I would say it depends on how much money he has, but given those physical symptoms, it would be safe to say that he has quite a sizable amount. So he has the devouring for sure." "Indeed." The High Priest gave a grey nod before tapping a finger lightly against his temple. "It would probably be wise for him to sign with a noble as soon as possible. A contract. He will not survive otherwise." I tightened my grip on the sound-blocking magic tool. Signing a contract meant selling your life to a noble. In return for being given the magic tools you needed to survive, you would spend your whole life enslaved to them, essentially becoming a walking mana tank for your noble to drain. I shuddered at the thought of Dirk, a baby as young as my little brother, suffering a fate like that. "High Priest, could you not make him a blue priest that offers up mana like myself, or otherwise set up an adoption with the noble? It will cost a significant amount to raise the baby as a blue priest. Who will pay for that?" Having become a blue shrine maiden myself, I knew all too well how much money it cost to live like this. I had almost run out of money preparing for winter despite the mine workshop supporting me. Clothes, shoes, and pretty much every other little thing was expensive. "You have been able to cover your expenses by earning your own money," the High Priest continued. "But do you expect an orphan baby to do the same?" "No. Or are you suggesting that you will cover both of your expenses? Will you pay that much for a baby that has no blood relation to you? Is that something your family would permit? Even if so, would that not be the orphanage director showing favoritism to a single orphan?" I fell silent. I wasn't even sure I could afford to cover both of our expenses forever, and it was forbidden in the orphanage to prioritize one orphan over the others. I wanted to help him, but I couldn't think of what to do. All I could do was keep quiet. The High Priest, seeing my hesitation, softened his expression. "In regard to having a noble adopt him, all adoptions need direct authorization from the Archduke. It is not possible for me to simply engineer one wherever I like. In your case, it was determined that you and your quantity of mana, talent for earning money, and otherworldly wisdom being put in the care of an archnoble would be for the best for the city." He said, indirectly revealing that there had been a lot of background forces at play when he was arranging for me to be adopted by Karlstadt. The High Priest had clearly stuck his neck out and worked hard for my sake. "Mine, am I correct to assume the baby is a male?" "Yes." "Oh, right, we hadn't checked to see the baby's sex when I spoke to the High Priest yesterday. He must have determined his gender by me calling it a he." "That will make things more difficult," he said with a slow shake of his head. "I believe I mentioned before that it is the mother's mana that influences how much mana her children have. A female baby might have had a future being adopted, though she would have been passed off as a natural child rather than an adopted one, so that she could be used as a pawn for political marriage. I bit my lip. Maybe it was just because I had my memories of living as a Japanese person, but I considered being a pawn for political marriage and being enslaved via a lifelong contract not much different. There is a slight chance that a noble might want to adopt him, given the current mana shortage, but I can say nothing for certain until I have measured the baby's quantity of mana. Tomorrow morning, yes, at third bell tomorrow, I will come to your chambers with a magic tool for measuring mana. I imagine that is all right? Absolutely, I shall be waiting, I said, handing the high priest a sound-blocking magic tool, but he handed it right back to me. I cocked my head in confusion and took it back, wondering if he had forgotten to say something. Mine, who else knows that the baby has a devouring? I lowered my eyes in thought. None of my attendants were familiar with the devouring. Fran had asked me about Dirk's symptoms since even he couldn't recognize them on sight. Lutz could probably guess, since I had asked for the Tau fruit and then gestured toward Dirk, but none of my attendants would know what that means. I think I'm the only one who firmly understands that Dirk's symptoms are being caused by mana. In that case, continue keeping this a secret. Be particularly careful that the High Bishop does not learn of this. Understood. I would have to keep it hidden from Delia that Dirk had the devouring. If she didn't know about the devouring, she couldn't inform the High Bishop about it. I felt a little sad that I had to hide things about Dirk from Delia, despite her showing him so much love, as she strove to be a good older sister. The next day at third bell, the High Priest visited my chambers with Arno. We had finished feeding Dirk and changed his diaper ahead of time. He often, did his business right after we put his own new diaper on, but there was no helping that. Well, they do that. It sucks. You go to change the diaper after they pee, and then boom, they poop. Right after. It sucks. That's how you waste diapers that way. One interesting thing, though, was that Dirk didn't cry very much. He generally had a happy smile on his face as long as his diaper was clean and his belly was full. He was rarely fussy when put to bed and didn't require as much upkeep as most babies might, which was much appreciated by everyone. Incidentally, our Camille cried a lot more than Dirk. He was especially noisy when he wanted to sleep, and he wouldn't fall asleep unless Mom was carrying him. I couldn't tell whether this contrast was due to the difference in age or whether it was just down to their personality. Probably personality. At the moment, Dirk was sleeping on top of a large straw stuffed cushion set in the corner of my room. Delia was sitting next to it looking after him. The cushion was Dirk's bed and could be easily moved to the first floor where Fran was looking after him, then to Rosina's and Delia's rooms on the second floor when it was their turn. I heard a door open on the first floor, then heard Fran say, "Good morning, High Priest." "Where is the baby?" "The second floor. Please follow me." Delia, realizing from Fran's voice that the High Priest had come, dropped her happy smile and turned to look at the staircase with a hard frown. To me, the High Priest was someone I could rely on for anything and everything, but it seemed Delia saw him as someone who wasn't to be trusted. "I thank you ever so much for coming all this way. Mine, clear the room." Arnold set a magic tool down to the table and crossed his arms in front of his chest before stepping back. It was a circlet studded with small magic stones like those on the divine instruments. "Please leave, everyone." I cleared the room and Delia looked uneasily between me and Dirk, who was still resting on his cushion, while slowly walking down the stairs. Once everyone was gone, the High Priest took out the sound-blocking magic tool. "Clearing the room is not enough to prevent our voices from being heard downstairs," he explained. After grabbing the sound-blocking magic tool, I walked toward where Dirk was sleeping. The High Priest followed with the mana measuring magic tool. He pressed the magic stones against Dirk's head, and the circlet shrunk to fit him perfectly. At this point, something that minor wasn't enough to surprise me even a little bit. Oh, the stones were changing colors. I knew very well from offering up my mana to the divine instruments that phase stones change colors when absorbing mana. That was apparently how noble children had their mana measured when they were born. Once the color changing slowed, the High Priest removed the circlet and counted the number of differently colored stones. He has about as much as a med noble on the stronger side. A med noble? I would have thought he had more mana than me. Mine had lived up to the age of 5 with the devouring. So Dirk being close to death already made me think he had much more mana than I did, but apparently that wasn't the case. A baby so ruled by emotions is incapable of controlling mana, and a small girl with the mind of an adult are incompatible in mental strength. But more importantly, you have been compressing your mana without anyone having taught you how to, no? The High Priest explained that as one grew used to controlling mana, they could compress it and fit more into their body. He could estimate how much mana mine had from the fact that it was enough to eat her alive at 5 years old. Dirk probably had more mana than she did when she was born, but when I awoke in her mind, I successfully pushed the heat deep inside of me, which made space for more mana to grow. Each time the mana filled up and started to rampage within me, I compressed it even deeper inside of me, making even more space. This process repeated until I basically had a stupid amount of mana. The high priest went on to say that I had an enormous amount compressed within my small body, so much that it was hard to believe I could contain it at all. Compressing mana like that was apparently a technique that nobles usually learned in the Royal Academy before puberty hit. Doesn't that mean all nobles could have more mana if they practice from a young age? Don't imply it's so simple, fool. Allowing mana to fill your entire body before containing it with sheer force of mind is to dance with death, putting yourself on the verge of being eaten alive. You have experience with that, no? Yes, it's happened countless times. It really was hard to count how many times I had battled with the heat to push it back inside my body. In the end, I had so much mana because over the year and a half that had passed between me starting to live as mine and me joining the temple, I had spent every day on the verge of death. It is difficult to compress mana without having a mind strong enough to force it into place. Does it not make sense to wait until children grow and can be taught the proper methods for doing so? Every year, there are a number of students who fail to control their mana and consequently have a brush with death. Brushes with death have been a normal daily affair for me, but noble children were given magic tools from birth to shield them from such danger. They just poured their mana into these tools until they could go to the Royal Academy and learn to control it. Blue priests didn't go to the academy and so never learned to control or increase their mana, which meant they were stuck pouring away their mana forever. Well, your case is irrelevant here. There might be some who would like to adopt a devouring child with such an abundance of mana due to the mana shortage, but given that we are in the process of concealing information to keep you safe, it would be dangerous to spread word of us seeking a family for a devouring child. If an adoption wasn't possible, I at least wanted Dirk to sign with a family who would treat him right. I looked up at the High Priest. High Priest, could you sign a contract with Dirk? I could, but I will not. I have absolutely no need for that baby's mana. It turned out that it was largely nobles restrained by a lack of mana who signed with devouring children. They were driven by their want of mana for maintaining their land and using their noble magic tools. Devouring contracts weren't something they wanted to be particularly public, so while well-raised children could be given positions as servants or for future mistresses, those who were poorly raised would often be locked in the cellar and treated like animals, which explained why the guildmaster was spending so much money on raising Frida like a noble. I stared at the floor sadly as I thought about what Dirk's future held, which made the High Priest give an exasperated sigh. If you are that concerned about him, you can sign with him yourself after Karlstadt adopts you. Me? I asked, blinking in surprise. I hadn't even considered signing with Dirk myself when I became a noble. Upon being adopted, you will have the noble status necessary to form such a contract. Hide the nature of his sickness and raise him in the orphanage until then. I thank you ever so much. If I signed with Dirk, nobody would be able to complain that me raising him properly was a show of favoritism. Though I would have to listen to the High Priest and Karlstadt's advice, the latter because he would be my adopted father. All I had to do was hide Dirk's devouring until then. It seemed that his future would be brighter than I thought. As I rejoiced, the High Priest narrowed his eyes as if glaring at me. Mine, this is no time to be rejoicing. The High Bishop will no doubt seek to exploit the baby if he learns of his devouring. You defy him at every opportunity, whereas the baby has no will of its own. It is clear which of you he will attempt to make his own. If you wish to protect him, keep his secret safe until the very end. The High Bishop will want to use Dirk's mana for his own means, and if the High Bishop demanded custody of Dirk, I had no means of refusing him. You would do well to always remember that your position in the temple and your future will be greatly determined by whether or not you can protect the baby. Understood. After telling me that Dirk's mana would be contained for a bit, thanks to the mana measuring tool draining him of mana, the High Priest took the circlet and left. Delia came running up the stairs a second later. Sister mine, what did the High Priest say? What is Dirk sick with? He's fine, I said with a slow shake of my head. The High Priest said to continue raising him as we have been. I see. That's such a relief. Delia's tense shoulders loosened as she hugged Dirk, rubbing her cheek against his. The sight was a firm reminder that I couldn't let any other noble adopt Dirk, nor sign a submission contract with him. Sister mine, I have come for Dirk, came another voice. Thank you, Wilma. Fran and Rosina went on break in the afternoon, and since they couldn't rest easy with Dirk around, we would move him to the orphanage. Delia watched on sorrowfully as Wilma picked Dirk up and left for the orphanage with him. You can accompany him to the orphanage, if you would like, Delia. But Fran and Rosina are on break, and Gil is at the workshop. Sister mine, you would have no attendance on hand if I went now. Delia shot me a sharp look over the very idea. I do not mind coming with you. Sister mine, I think I mentioned that I didn't want to go to the orphanage, she replied coldly. I suppose you did, I replied casually while heading to my desk. It wouldn't be ideal for me to wander around outside of my room while both Fran and Rosina were taking a break. So I decided to just focus on making a second black and white picture book for Dirk. Unlike Camille, who had just been born, Dirk was already on the verge of rolling over in bed. He was surely almost old enough to see black and white picture books properly. Sister Mime, what do you think Dirk is doing right now? Napping, I imagine. I drew pictures composed of circles and triangles on white paper using ink. All I had to do next was use the hide glue we had dried over the winter to stick the paper onto boards. I would have Fran prepare the hide glue for me when he woke up. Dad could then open holes in the boards, and after tying them together with thick string, the book would be done. Sister Mine, do you think Dirk is crying, or maybe feeling lonely? I imagine he isn't feeling lonely with all the children around, though it may be too noisy for him to sleep. But Dirk needs to sleep. Raising your voice at me won't change anything. I can't even say for sure whether it is noisy over there. I replied disinterestedly while writing down a to-do list on my diptych. First, I needed to buy multiple different kinds of wax from a wax workshop. Stencils used for mimeograph printing were usually made with resin mixed into the wax to help them retain their form. But my plan was to try rolling using only wax this time. If it worked, it worked. But who knew what problems might arise? Sister Mine, aren't you worried about Dirk? Not really, since Wilma is keeping a close eye on him. Next, I went to talk to someone from an ink workshop about making colored ink. Nothing in the orphanage seemed like it would be a good material for making pigments, so maybe a workshop could help us with that. You can't be sure of that. Geez, Sister Mine, are you even listening to me? Delia exploded with anger after I kept giving half-hearted replies. I looked up from my diptych to give her an exaggerated sigh. If you're that worried about him, go and check for yourself. Wilma would love to have you there. I don't want to go to the orphanage. Delia bit her lip in frustration. The conflict she was having between wanting to go and not wanting to go was clear on her face. Very well, would you like me to go and check on him then? No fair! Delia grabbed my sleeve. I couldn't help but laugh. I had only said that because I knew it wouldn't be ladylike for me to leave my room without attendance, and she had jumped on the bait like a tiger. In that case, Delia, why not come with me? Delia's light blue eyes wavered, and she swung her crimson red hair as she fought an internal battle. When she looked up, she glared at me with watery eyes and bit her lip once more. I won't go. I shrugged and turned back to face my desk, having no reason to argue with her decision. She didn't say anything after that. All she did was wander around aimlessly, but somehow I felt that Dirk was so cute that it was only a matter of time before Delia would be running to the orphanage. Okay, The Ink Guild in succession. Mine, Master Benno told me to ask when the next day you're free is, said Les. It was about 10 days after Camille's birth that the Gilberta Company called for a meeting with me. I guessed that Benno had found a wax workshop to take me to, or rather that was the only reason I could think of for him to call me over. He wants to take me to a wax workshop, right? It's better if I have Fran with me, so how about the day after tomorrow in the morning? Yeah, apparently there's someone who wants to meet you. What? Aw. My hype died in an instant. I wanted to go to a wax workshop as soon as possible, but my dreams were not being granted. I agreed to go, albeit with pursed lips. You might want to bring Gil with you instead of Fran. Master Benno said it's a craftsman from an ink workshop. Their words made my hype roar back up like a reborn phoenix. I had been wanting to meet someone from an ink workshop to talk about developing new ink. This would be a good opportunity to talk about making colored ink. I can't wait, Let's. Your mood sure improved fast. Let's shot me an exasperated look which made me realize something. The decreased head of the Ink Guild had been probing for information about me. Maybe the new head was carrying on his legacy? Wait. Should I really be meeting and talking with someone from the Ink Guild? I asked worriedly. Let's looked at me, then fell into thought for a second before replying. If Master Benno thinks it's fine, it probably is. Okay, I'll go ahead and look forward to it then. On the scheduled morning, Let's came to get me, and we departed for the Gilberta Company with Daniel and Gil. Even though Mark seemed really busy, he still came outside upon noticing us through the store window. Good morning, Lady Mine. Your visitors are already here. Good morning, Mark. Would you be so kind as to take a moment from your busy day to guide us there? With his usual calm smile, Mark guided us to Benno's office in the Gilberta Company building, where I found a familiar-looking foreman and a not-so-familiar young woman waiting. The ink workshop foreman had his brows furrowed in the same high-strung way I remembered from last time. I could tell that the young woman had come of age because she had done her reddish-brown hair up, though it was just a simple braid that she had twisted into a bun. So I could guess she didn't care that much about appearances. The way her gray curiosity-filled eyes flitted all over made her look really young. Hey, Dad, is that her? She's rich, don't point. Apparently they were father and daughter. He warned her in a lower voice, and she immediately hid her pointing finger behind her back, but her eyes, two little balls of unceasing curiosity, remained locked on me. Good morning, Lady Mine. Benno welcomed me into his office and gestured for me to sit next to him. I nodded and looked at Daniel, who smoothly escorted me there and helped seat me with trained elegance. I expected nothing less from a noble. I'm Bierce. Wolf passed away, and now I'm the new head of the Ink Guild. I didn't want this, but now I've taken the job. I want to do as much as I can to help save the guild, the foreman said before rubbing his brow and explaining what was happening in the Ink Guild. Apparently, the circumstances of Wolf's death had been very suspicious, and none of the ink workshop foremen in Ehrenfest wanted the job. Nobody had stepped up to the plate, instead trying to push the responsibilities onto someone else until Bierce ultimately took the fall. My sympathy. I don't like speaking ill of the dead, but Wolf went too far and got involved in things he really shouldn't have. Bierce said, his head hung low. It seemed he was having an extremely hard time cleaning up after all of Wolf's messes, which had been mercilessly pushed onto him. He continued, kind of mumbling his words like someone not used to talking much. I want to keep the workshops running and bring them all together, but I'm not a good talker, as you can tell. I'm no salesman. Normally, ink workshops just had to make the ink. The actual selling was done by merchants from the Merchants Guild or local stores. But there was only one stationery store in the lower city that could sell ink, and Wolf had been using forceful measures to monopolize business with nobles. The craftsmen were fine making ink no matter how it was sold, but somebody's got to deal with the nobles now that Wolf's dead. You wouldn't expect the old man running the stationery store to suddenly have to start dealing with nobles out of nowhere, would you? Business with nobles brought in a lot of profit, but there were more than enough problems to balance that out. From my perspective, Benno may have been dealing with nobles no problem, but in reality he was deeply on edge whenever he met Sylvester or the High Priest, with plenty of stress-induced headaches following afterward. That was reasonable. There was a lot you had to memorize just to greet nobles, and a single mistake could financially ruin you. It would just be cruel to expect a store used to casually dealing with the richer demographic in the lower city to suddenly have to do business with nobles. The store owner wouldn't know how to deal with them, and neither would his Laharls or successor. They would have no real opportunity to learn about nobles, and they would be replacing someone who had died in a mysterious way while dealing with them. Nobody would agree to that. Anyone would run away if they thought nobles were involved. In reality, only the owners of the largest stores in the city had direct relations with nobles. There really weren't many, and if you thought of which of those stores could reasonably deal in ink, the number shrank even further. The Guildmaster store deals in goods for nobles, doesn't it? Why don't you ask him? Benno asked with a raised eyebrow. The fact that he hadn't offered to sell the ink himself and had instead thrown the offer the Guildmaster's way probably meant that the ink business was really unattractive, had a lot of problems attached to it, or just wasn't an area that Benno was interested in spreading his business into. Bierce, having seemingly hoped Benno would take up the job, slumped forward in disappointment and shook his head. I wish I could, but this is all stuff the Guildmaster store was dealing with in the past. Then Wolf monopolized things the second he became head of the Ink Guild. You can guess what'll happen if I go to him, right? Benno grimaced, having immediately imagined what kind of an attitude the Guildmaster would have. He'd wring you dry. I could see that geezer's nasty grin already. Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you. It wouldn't be strange for the Gilberta Company to start selling ink, as they were already selling books made by the Mine Workshop, which had invented the new ink in the first place, and was guaranteed to become a large customer. But Benno just rubbed his temples and shook his head. It's not that simple. There are going to be nobles wanting me to keep up whatever shady stuff Wolf was doing, and if I start selling ink, that Guildmaster's going to give me an even harder time than he already is. I looked up at Benno. So you'd let someone else take the business. I can understand Benno's hesitation, but if another store started doing business with the Ink Guild, I would have to do business with them too. It was exhausting just thinking about how long it would take for them to not judge me based on appearance and start doing real business with me. We already know that I'll need a lot of ink when I want to start printing with the Mine Workshop. I would rather do business with you than anyone else, Benno. See? The girl's saying it too. Come on, Benno. But, Benno protested, a conflicted expression on his face. But his refusal was weaker than before. Sensing that, Bierce looked at me and pleaded desperately. Could you dig into him a little more for me, girl? I don't mind helping to convince Benno, but only if you help me develop colored ink. Colored ink? What are you talking about? While Bierce blinked in confusion, the girl next to him shot up a hand. I'll do it. That's why I'm here. Sorry, but can I ask your name? It's Heidi. She's my daughter, and she'll be running my workshop one day. She loves making ink and discovering new things. She didn't even calm down when she turned 20. Oh, she's already become of age. She and her husband are the ones making the ink you invented for plant paper. Even though she only looked about 15 at a glance, she was actually over 20 and already married. Wowee. Your ink's so new and fresh. It really rocked my world. Looking forward to working with you. My name is Mine. I think we will do great things together. Right now, nobody's buying plant paper ink except your workshop. Buy lots and use lots, okay? The only real problem with normal ink was that it damaged the plant paper a little too much. It wasn't useless or anything, which meant that even if more people started buying the somewhat cheaper plant paper, most would probably just keep using the ink they were used to. There was no need for them to go out of their way to buy separate ink, and most importantly, what I taught the Ink Guild to make was highly sticky ink specifically made for printing. It was hard to imagine anyone else but me would want any right now. I guess I'll have to hurry up with making my second picture book then. Yep, and by the way, I thought this while making the plant paper ink, but it definitely seems like you can make different colored ink the same way. Heidi had figured out that you could make colored ink, but it wasn't able to experiment with it herself. This was because her dad, Beers, had told her that the Gilberta Company had signed an expensive magic contract to transfer rights to the black ink, and that they might have already done the same with colored ink, but she had wanted to make colored ink so badly that she convinced him to go talk to Benno to discuss whether or not they could experiment. Benno barely knew anything about making ink, which is how this meeting with me came to be. It is indeed possible to make colored ink. Please feel free to make as much as you want. Well, it's also like, what material should I use? I came home here hoping you'd have some ideas for me. I got a lot of materials used for plants, paints, and dyes together, but which should be good for ink? Heidi asked, her gray eyes gleaming as she looked straight at me. I started to open my mouth to answer, but Benno clamped a hand on my shoulder. Mine? You get how this works by now, right? His eyes were saying it loud and clear. Don't talk for free. I shut my mouth and gave Benno a nod before turning back to look at Heidi. I will take 1/10 of all profits from the colored ink as payment for my information. That's way too much. It'll cost us a ton of money to develop this stuff before we can even start selling it. Heidi exclaimed, almost shrieking. She had a very good idea how much research and development would cost. I tilted my head and thought, I will take 1/10 of the profits from the colored ink, but we will cover half of the research and development cost. Okay, you've got a deal. Heidi thrusted a hand on the spot, her face shining. Negotiation complete. But when I went to shake her hand, Benno grabbed onto my hand just as Beer smacked a hand onto Heidi's. That's not for you two to decide. Heidi and I both looked at our respective guardians, hands on our heads. But why not? Wasn't that a fair deal? Not at all. You are being stupidly generous. If you're going to be giving out information, you only need to cover 1/4 of the development fees at most. Yeah, that's more reasonable. Benno nodded in agreement Beers nodded in agreement to Benno's correction. The two of them started working out the details, but I just wanted to start talking to Heidi about colored ink already. She seemed to be thinking the same thing, judging by the hopeful look she was giving me as she wriggled in place. Ma'am, want to come to my workshop? I've got all the materials I could think of laid out for you, though Dad got real mad at me about that. That sounds absolutely wonderful. Of course I would like to come. I could already tell that Heidi and I would be getting along just fine. We both stood up at the same time, but were grabbed and forced back down by our respective guardians. We're not done talking yet. Hold your horses, idiot. Our guardians were completely synchronized. Benno let out a heavy sigh while still holding me down. All right, I'll take care of selling the ink for now, but all we'll have a monopoly over is the plant paper ink the mine workshop uses. That includes the colored ink. Anything else is up for grabs by anyone who comes knocking to join the market. Give the guildmaster more targets to focus on. All right, thanks. This is a big help. Benno and Beers' exhausting back and forth finally concluded with sellers for the ink being decided upon. Can I go to the workshop now? Let's go work on the ink. Heidi and I stood up, prompting Benno to call Lutz. He placed a hand on his shoulder. Keep a close eye on them, Lutz. Seems like we got 2 mines in our hands now. Master Benno, that's too much even for me. I've got my hands full with just 1 mine. An extremely uneasy expression washed over Benno's face, and I waved goodbye with a big smile as we headed off for the ink workshop. But it wasn't long before Heidi ran out of patience with my walking speed and just sprinted ahead on her own, saying that she would get things ready for us. Beers paled and apologized on her behalf, but I didn't mind. It wasn't anything to get upset about. So, Lutz, what do you think about Heidi? I think she's funny and hardworking, but kind of weird. You're one to talk. The workshop Beers took us to looked like a chemistry lab at school rather than a place to make ink. There was a ton of equipment lying around, with craftsmen using scales to carefully measure out materials that would be used to make gallon of ink. The plant paper ink was being made off in one corner. There were several jars packed full of the finished ink, which was where I found Heidi getting yelled at by a 20-something-year-old guy. It sounded like his complaints could be summarized as, finish your work before playing around. Beers, is Heidi busy? No, there's nothing to be concerned about. Hey, Joseph, don't worry about Heidi right now. She's got a customer to deal with today. Beers yelled over the din of the workshop. Heidi turned around with a beaming smile, whereas the man named Joseph blinked in stunned surprise. Boss, are you insane? You're letting Heidi deal with a customer? This here is an important patron who wants colored ink and is willing to pay 1/4 of the development cost for it. We don't need to stop Heidi's research today. Just watch and make sure she doesn't do anything rude. The conversation was more than enough for me to infer how Heidi was normally treated here. Lady Mine, this is Joseph. He's Heidi's husband and the de facto successor of the workshop. Hope you and him get along nice enough. I'm Mine, the forewoman of the Mine workshop. I have come to buy the plant paper ink you've made and to start also develop new colored ink, I said, which made Joseph give a sigh of relief. It seemed the lack of buyers for the plant paper ink had been making him nervous. This is how much we've made so far. Please bring it to our store by the end of tomorrow, said Les. He was buying the ink as a lahurl from the Goberta company to then sell to the Mine workshop later. It seemed tedious and unnecessary, but was apparently an important process. I left the merchant business to Les and instead looked around the workshop. Daniel and Yoko had come with us and were peering around too, intrigued by what life was like in the lower city. Lady Mine, come here, over here. I went over to where Heidi was beckoning me and saw small amounts of a wider range of materials placed on a table. They had all been turned into powder already, which made it impossible to tell what was what. There was also a variety of different oils. Heidi, what kind of oils are these? I got every kind I could. Just linseed oil might not be enough. Right? Indeed, I was thinking the same thing. As an essential component of ink was drying oil. But the only thing like that in the city I knew of was linseed oil, something I had been able to guess existed when I saw hemp and linen in this world, which were made from the plants that grew from the seeds that were turned into oil. But there wasn't much linseed oil here, and it was all expensive. I had just been thinking that I wanted to search for oil that could be used in its place, and now would be a good opportunity to learn more about the different kinds of oil in this world. Some oils harden when exposed to air, and some don't, but it's the ones that harden that are good for making ink, I said. They're called drying oils. There's not much oil like that other than linseed oil, just meese, pagan, ease, and turmoil, Heidi said, grabbing the respective jars of oil from the lined-up row. I hurriedly got out my diptych and wrote down the names of the flowers and nuts she had listed. The ink I'm familiar with is mostly made from grinding minerals into a powder and then mixing it with oil. Let's see. This yellow clay should make an ink colored something between yellow and brown. Okay, let's give it a shot. Joseph, lend us a hand. Heidi called Joseph over and got right to work mixing the oil and clay on top of a granite slab. Huh? It's not turning brown? But why? Yellow clay mixed with oil should have made a brownish yellow color. It wouldn't make sense for it to turn into any other color, and yet the mixture had turned a bright sky blue before my very eyes. I stared at it in a daze. Let's try using another kind of oil. Joseph and Heidi tried mixing the clay with the other oils one by one. First maize, then pigeon, ice, and then finally turn. Ice was the only kind that produced the yellow color I was expecting, while the others turned red and greenish blue, completely outside of my expectations. All we could do was blink in surprise as we stared at the 5 different colors on the slab. This just doesn't make any sense, right? Right. I never would have guessed the kind of oil we used would change the ink's color. It's surprising, but I guess we should be glad that we were able to make so many different colors using just a single kind of material. Joseph, who was now rolling his tired shoulders to stretch his muscles, looked at me with an exhausted expression. You're more optimistic than I expected. Well, all I want is colored ink, so I'm happy as long as it doesn't turn transparent. I went ahead and wrote our results on my diptych. Maybe there was a method to the madness. Meanwhile, Lutz looked at the ink with a hand on his chin. How'd this even happen? What's going on here? You're curious too? It's really weird, isn't it? Don't you just want to figure it out no matter what? Exclaimed Heidi, eagerly clasping Lutz's hands with a manic grin on her face. It seemed she was the type of girl who really wanted to figure out anything she didn't understand. I shut my diptych. Heidi, it doesn't matter why this is happening right now. What does matter is which colors we can make from combining these materials. What? Something mysterious is happening right in front of you, and I don't even want to figure out what's causing it? Heidi's gray eyes opened wide, and she looked at me with a mixture of surprise and betrayal. Joseph immediately reached out from the side to grab onto her head. Quit it, this fine lady isn't a weirdo like you. Weirdo? That's so mean. I thought she and I would get along great. I sympathized with Heidi, but I wasn't exactly in this to solve any scientific mysteries. I just wanted to make colored picture books for my cute little brother, Camille. And by the way, while I wasn't particularly interested in doing research myself, I welcomed any and all books that compiled the results of any research. I'm more interested in the result of the process than the process that produces the results. Ice gave us the color I wanted, and that's what matters. Let's try mixing that blue powder With the ice next, we might find some important connections and differences along the way. I pointed at the blue powder and Heidi gave me a big nod. I can agree with you there, let's get back to it. Ice had given us the yellow color I wanted, but mixing it with the blue powder that looked like lapis lazuli produced a bright yellow for some reason. It would be perfect for painting a field of sunflowers, but yellow wasn't the color I was looking for. In the end, it was the linseed oil that gave us a lapis lazuli-esque blue. This might be hard, I said, glaring at the results written on my diptych. The gap between my knowledge and the knowledge of this world was just too great. The huge number of materials and the 5 different kinds of oil seemed to make an endless number of possible colors. This might be hard indeed. Okay. I think I'm going to end this part off here, guys. I'll see y'all next time.